we have a podcast.
Diving deep into all things Texas, both on and off the field. Here's Sean Pendergast and Pro Football Hall of Famer, the General, John McClain. Welcome to Houtopia.
Okay, so this is a good segue because there's other injury concerns with this team, but let's talk about those injury concerns within the parameters of the game coming up this Sunday, and let's do our pregame six-pack. Week 1 at Baltimore. The Texans are I think they're up to a 10-point underdog now, John, so I think that's hit double digits here. It's been 9.5 for most of the offseason, but I would imagine cluster injuries on the offensive line are enough to move a line, certainly. So let's call it a 10-point spread on this game. We'll give our predictions when the six-pack is over here, John, but let's dig into the 6 most important players or storylines with this game, and you go first.
I'm going to start right there with George Fant. George Fant wasn't even on the roster when first week of training camp. Then he got signed out of desperation. He's a veteran. At least he got a lot of playing time in preseason. They need him to just be serviceable. He's bounced around, but man, they didn't want George Fant to have to be starting any more than they wanted Josh Jones and Jaret Patterson.
That's crazy. John, that's the wildest thing to me about this offensive line depth chart is how many of them just weren't even Houston Texans like a month ago. You know, like Jaret Patterson, if you look at the depth chart, as far as, I'm not saying as far as number of games because they haven't played any games yet, but like as far as the length of time that they've been an employee of the Houston Texans, I'll call it, the length of time since they filled out their HR paperwork to sign up for benefits in the 401k and things like that, Jaret Patterson's like middle of the pack as far as tenured Houston Texans right now, and he's never taken a snap in an NFL game. Josh Jones they trade for. They bring in, is it Nick Broker, the kid they brought in off of waivers from Buffalo, the 7th-round pick, who's kind of intriguing to me. But yeah, then George Fant. I'm sure I'm
Kendrick Green.
Kendrick Green.
Kendrick Green.
Yeah. I mean, that's 4 guys right there. So literally Jaret Patterson is tied with Juice Scruggs for the amount of time they've been Texans employees. Well, I guess technically Juice Scruggs, an employee one more day than Patterson. He got drafted on day 2, not day 3.
I feel bad for CJ Stroud because people around the country will look at his stats. Oh man, he's terrible. And they won't pay any attention to who they got in their offensive line.
You know what? You know who I don't think cares about that? CJ Stroud. Like I've been so impressed with how he just handles the ebbs and flows of everything that's all the narratives and things like that come at him. I'm guessing we'll talk about him here in the 6-pack at some point. But John, I'm going to go with my first one here in the 6-pack, getting ready for Baltimore. And it's Jimmy Ward, the safety for the Texans. We're talking about injury concerns on the offensive line with all those guys out. Jimmy Ward has not practiced this week due to a groin injury. And that's obviously him not being out on the practice field doesn't bode well for this weekend, but the nature of the injury too, when it's a groin injury like this and it's a soft tissue injury, the chances of re-aggravating it sometime down the road, the fact that you probably need to be all the way back to 100% before you get him back out on the field. Like you can't muscle through a groin injury and have it, like some injuries you can kind of plow through and the healing is still going on. You're going to aggravate it in a football game. Jimmy Ward, and he's quickly, John, become a guy that is a core player for this team. He's one of the 4 captains of this team. He's a good player. Like he's a fringe top 100 player, according to I know the NFL top 100 is what it is, but if you're getting nominated and named on there, you're a pretty good football player, regardless of how you feel about that poll. He's a guy who is I think he was number 104 in the NFL top 100, something like that. So he's a good football player at a really important position for this defense against the Baltimore Ravens. I'm not as concerned about it as I am the offensive line. But defensively, this is by far my biggest concern is Jimmy Ward not being on the field.
Yeah. What if Christian Harris is not on the field? At least they got
That
a couple of veterans with extensive playing time behind Ward, and they don't have that in their offensive line, guys who've played a lot off the bench. My number 2 is Dameon Pierce because the running game can control so much. He can break tackles, and they need him desperately to help control the ball. And offensive linemen would rather run block than pass protect. So maybe those guys can fire off the ball, or they're going to not fire off the ball. They're going to do the running back. Pierce going to take one cut and go. And maybe in the new blocking scheme that Bobby Slowick has installed, maybe it's like running back. Doesn't really matter who's playing in the offensive line. But Dameon Pierce is so important to what they hope to accomplish.
You know what I'm anxious to see with Pierce, John, is how much they use him in the passing game. They worked on that a lot during training camp, the Texans did, in throwing the ball to Dameon Pierce out of the backfield. And we know that's a staple of this offense as well, getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers any way that you can. I'm anxious to see, what the screen game looks like, or, trying to get the ball into Pierce's hands in other ways. And I do like the fact that they have really upgraded the depth at that position compared to last year. Last year it was Dameon Pierce, and then John, who was it right after him? Go ahead.
Rex bleeping Burkhead.
Right, that's right. And so now it's Devin Singletary, who's an accomplished, still young NFL player. Mike Boone had one of the best training camps of any player on the Texans. So yeah, I mean, if the offensive line can find a rhythm and open up some holes, it's not just Pierce, but I think some of these other guys too can maybe get some on game day.
Sean, one of the things about Pierce catching the ball, he's going to get so many hits running the ball. I'd rather see him run, Singletary catch, but every time Singletary goes in, he can't throw in the ball. He's got to run it some too.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be hard for Pierce to withstand the punishment of a 17-game season. He missed almost 5 full games as a rookie, but he's somebody we definitely got to keep an eye on, because he holds the key to unlocking that door on the defense. And but it's just so much to ask with the issues in the line.
I'd love to know how he was feeling last year, Pierce, when he went on injured reserve I think it was after the Cowboys game in week 14. That sounds about right. Maybe week 14 or 15. I can't remember. But that's when he went on IR, and he didn't go on IR because he was banged up. He went on IR because he had there's a very specific ankle injury that he had. He didn't go on there because he's got bruises everywhere and he had 200 and something carries and he'd never had that number of carries before. He went on IR because he had a very specific ankle injury. But I am curious, how was he feeling physically at that point? How beat up was he? Did he feel like he could have gone another 4 games if he had to during the season? Because you're right. He took a lot of hits. And it doesn't look like, John, I'm going to base this on him just outright just trying to truck Lonnie Johnson instead of trying to elude Lonnie Johnson in the open field in that Saints preseason game. He just buried his shoulder into the middle of Lonnie Johnson's chest. That Dameon Pierce is not changing his running style at all in this new offense.
The game he got hurt in, it was early, and he missed almost a full game there. So it was almost 5 full games. Danny Barrett, the running backs coach, said they want him to get the first down. But if you get the first down and you're on the sideline and you're about to get creamed, just step out of bounds.
Yeah.
Don't try to run over 3 guys.
Dude, I think it's hard to change the way Dameon Pierce is wired, man. I don't know. That'll be interesting to see. John, my next one here, this one's kind of a not off the radar, but I would say a little further down the depth chart. I think a lot of people were very confused when Desmond King was cut, just based on the fact that he's played a lot of good football for this team. Tavier Thomas did not have a great preseason this year. He was in the joint practices and in the games. It was not awesome for Tavier Thomas. He is now their starting slot corner with Desmond King gone. And I'm going to be very anxious to see this game. Zay Flowers, the rookie out of Boston College, is the slot receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. So much has been made about them getting J.K. Dobbins back healthy, signing Odell Beckham Jr., new offense, Todd Monken. I think Zay Flowers has a chance to be the real X factor out of all these guys. He was a really good player at Boston College. He's an explosive player. He's quick. Tavier Thomas handling the X factor. I think Zay Flowers is, I think Raven fans probably view him similar to how we view Tank Dell here in Houston. Young receiver, rookie receiver, guy you try to get the ball in his hands any way you can and then let him go do some sizzly things. So that's mine, because I think the X factor for the Ravens offensively, aside from Lamar Jackson, obviously, is rookie Zay Flowers. And I think they're going to look across the line and they're not going to want to throw at Stingley. They're not going to want to throw at Steven Nelson or Jalen Petrie. They're going to go find, what numbers is he wearing? I think 4. I think Tavier Thomas wearing 4. They're going to find where 4 is on the field and go try to attack his guy.
They're going to watch his tape from last year, Pro Football Focus, and I saw 2 other companies like that had him as number 1 slot corner in the NFL. And they had Jimmy Ward close behind him. I think he was 4. So Tavier Thomas played well last year, and they seem in ways we don't. But that's the most surprising cut they've had during when they reduced the offer, and it's still he's going to come in here at Pittsburgh. If he makes big plays, they're going to regret it. I still don't understand letting him go and keeping Shaquille Griffin unless there's something there we didn't know.
Yeah, I do. I mean, we asked Nick about it, Nick Caserio, on the show on Tuesday, and he didn't reveal much, obviously, about any sort of behind the scenes stuff with Desmond King, is who you're talking about now going to Pittsburgh. I thought it was funny that Tavierre Thomas, I saw footage in the open locker room the day after cuts, and he said, man, when I saw Desmond got cut, I thought I was getting cut too. So he knew. Tavierre Thomas knows. I mean, Desmond King, I know Pro Football Focus lists Tavierre Thomas as the number one slot corner. That did not match the eye test from what I saw in training camp this year, though, with him. So that's a big concern to me in this game. What's your last one for the six-pack, John?
Well, we can't do it without talking about C.J. Stroud and his debut as quarterback.
There you go.
I've got a column on him. The Astros have got one on them. But Stroud, he's in a really difficult situation, and we don't know who his top receiver is going to be. His routes are going to have to be quick drops, quick releases. He's got to make good decisions. Can't turn it over on the first series and let Baltimore get up on him 7-0. But there's a lot of pressure on Stroud. You know, D'Amico Ryan says, oh, there's no pressure on Stroud and Will Anderson. Well, there is. They may not be putting pressure on them themselves, and D'Amico may not be putting pressure on them, but the fans and the media certainly are, because they were second, third overall picks. But they need Stroud. Basically, don't turn it over and make good decisions and try to keep the game close. You know, they got a good kicker in Kaimi Fairbairn, but they can't have Stroud come out and have a bad game.
No, John, and I would submit he needs to have a great game if they're going to win this game. They're 10-point underdogs in this game. Like he's probably going to have to have a few plays that we look at and go, wow, that's why that guy was picked number 2 overall in the draft. I don't know that he can game manage their way through unless this Ravens offense is just super, super rusty. Because Lamar didn't play any in the preseason games, and it's a brand new OC it's a brand new OC who's not part of the lineage of Greg Roman, who was the OC before this. Like Todd Monken's being brought in, I think, being tasked with changing some very specific things about the way that Lamar Jackson is used. Look, he's a whole lot more expensive now on the salary cap than he was before. You can lose a $20 million quarterback and still go find some solutions for your team out there. You lose a $50 million quarterback, that's clogging up a whole lot of cap space. So, yeah, like in a weird way, I think the Texans are catching the Ravens at the right time from that standpoint, which brings me, I guess, to the last six-pack. You're going to go C.J. Stroud. We can't go without mentioning Will Anderson on the other side. I think every Texan fan out there is super excited to see what both of these guys are going to do in a real game situation, and I think I'm even more I'm most excited about CJ because he's the quarterback and he's the future. And if he's good, then that changes the trajectory of what the next 10 years in this town feels like. But we didn't see much of Will Anderson in the preseason, in the preseason games. Like he was sitting pretty early in these games. The one big play that we got teased with against Miami where he just bowled over the running back, caused the fumble, that wound up on all the highlight shows and things like that. But now Will Anderson, going against a pretty good offensive line in the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to talk about Will and for real or Fugazis here in just a second. But they're going to need some game-changing plays, to the same extent, John, where you talked about C.J. Stroud is going to need to protect the football. I think similarly on the defensive side, the Texans are going to need to cause a couple turnovers to win this game or hang around in this game. And when you look at who the turnover causers are on this defense, I think it's basically 3 guys you look at. I think it's Will Anderson, I think it's Jalen Petrie, and I think it's Derek Stingley Jr. Those are your 3 key guys that are capable of making big swinging plays.
It better be. You've mentioned Texans and winning now 4 times. I've never used those 2 in the same sentence. And that would be we don't see teams like TCU, right? What was the spread on that? 20 points?
20 and a half.
It would be a Deion/Buffaloes type performance that it would take from the Texans. And, the fact is TCU played a really close game. If the Texans could play a close game, I think people would consider it a victory if they could come within 10 points.
Yeah.
But, man, it's going to be tough with all – if everybody were healthy, it was going to be tough.
Yep.
Because there's still another off season away from even thinking about the playoffs. But I can't wait to see. Hopefully, under D'Amico Ryans, they'll surprise us.
Yeah.
And some of these things you're talking about, like big plays for Will Anderson, strip sacks, C.J. Stroud play really well for a rookie quarterback making his debut. Hopefully, some of those things will happen.
All right. So, John, let's give our prediction. We'll give our prediction on the season in just a second during For Real or Fugazi. But what is your prediction on this game on Sunday?
31-13.
Okay, so it's gone down. It was 31-16 earlier this week. So tight. No
You're
tight.
not going to ask me who?
Huh?
You're not going to ask me who?
Well,
I didn't say who.
Who, John? Who are you taking 31-13?
You know that's a silly question.
I do. That's what's the final score going to be? 31-13. Well, it's not like I'm not answering your question, Sean. You did ask what the final score was. I'm going 24-10. 24-10 Ravens in this game. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think there's a chance the Ravens come out and look a little rusty offensively, just based on new offense, new coordinator, no Lamar in the preseason. Like the record for guys last year who didn't play in the preseason, quarterbacks who didn't participate in preseason games was not good. I just think the Ravens they're clearly the better football team. They're at home. A lot of Texans, from the coaching staff to the actual roster, are doing their jobs for the very, very first time on an NFL level. And I don't think going against a team, John, that is, they are one of the 3 or 4 teams in the NFL that just has a brand and an ethos about them, the Ravens. Like the Ravens are always the Ravens, and so I 24-10, I'm with you on that one.
If they only give up 24 points to Lamar Jackson compared to the way they played when Lamar Jackson has killed them up there,
yeah.
Texans have never won there. Yeah. And a lot of the people are acting like Todd Monken, the new coordinator, is a game changer because of what he did at Georgia. He's been in the NFL twice, and he did a very good job. So I think if they only gave up 20 points, we'd feel pretty good about the defense next week.
I think so too. All right. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.